Williams' speed at the moment. 2 Grand Prix victories in 7 Grand Prix. Still not bad, but the speed just doesn't seem to be there. And Gerhard didn't really want to talk about what's going to happen if Williams come out with their new car. Christian Fittipaldi, during his very first season of Formula 1, had a nasty accident during the Saturday morning untimed session. He didn't go out on Saturday afternoon, he went to the hospital instead. Christian, who's qualified for all the Grand Prix so far this year, he hasn't scored a point yet. He retired in 4 Grand Prix and finished in 3. His best result was an 8th place in Monaco. But here, Fittipaldi didn't start. A very nasty looking accident, and of course the Eurosport cameras were there in the paddock to ask Christian what happened. Christian, what happened?
What happened, I spun on a 4th gear corner, which is almost flat out, very quick, and I went backwards.
Championship, Alessandro Zanardi during the next 3 Grand Prix. Of course, Zanardi making his debut last year for the Benetton team, and this year being, for the Jordan team, and this year being a Benetton test driver. A happy team these days is the Lotus team. That qualified very well in Canada. They didn't get a result. Both cars retired with gearbox troubles, but here they qualified 11th and 12th, and this is a man straight from the circuit. Number 27. Retired on his 1st and 2nd Grand Prix this year for Ferrari, then at the 4th and 3rd, retired again twice, and another 3rd place in Canada. And his drive in the wet in Barcelona, that was a very special Grand Prix. One of the men who's maybe behind the fact that Ferrari is getting back up to speed is Niki Lauda, 3-time world champion, and he's been there since South Africa. Since South Africa, what is the largest progress you've made with Ferrari? Next year. The Benettons again being very quick here in Magny-Cours. 2 Williams on the front row, then 2 McLarens. 5th again was Michael Schumacher, the man who's only failed to finish once this year, and his best result was a 2nd place in Barcelona. Teammate Martin Brundle hasn't had luck yet so far, but the lack of luck will probably change in the morning, but it did dry out, and eventually everybody was gonna start on slicks. Although the clouds were there, and it was very dark around this 2.6 mile long circuit. Nigel Mansell on the front row with Riccardo Patrese alongside him. Then this man, Ayrton Senna, together with Gerhard Berger alongside him. Michael Schumacher, Jean Alesi, Martin Brundle and Ivan Capelli. Then Thierry Boutsen and Eric Gomez. And the 2 Ligiers on their home circuit. This is Ligier country. The factory is based at Magny-Cours. And both Thierry Boutsen and Eric Gomez made it into the top 10. And Bradshaw there thinking it was gonna rain again. Well, it didn't just then, but it was gonna rain a little later. Riccardo Patrese, who hasn't won a race yet this year, starting his 232nd Grand Prix, a record which he will probably keep for a very long time indeed. And then this man, can he make it his 6th win out of 8 races? He didn't win in Monaco because of a loose wheel nut, and he didn't win in Montreal because he went off the road. Well, Nigel Mansell on pole position. Last year Riccardo Patrese blew the start. Now Nigel got caught out by the very quick change of lights, and Riccardo Patrese leads his teammate. All is well until we get to the Adelaide hairpin, where all hell breaks loose. Michael Schumacher hits Ayrton Senna. In the back, Stefano Modena hits Carl Wendlinger, and Bertrand Gachot, I think, started spinning on his own. And we're going to have a look at that in replay. Michael Schumacher trying to dive inside Ayrton Senna. Ayrton closed the door. Michael was committed, and that was the end of that. Schumacher could continue, get a new nose cone, but lose a lap. Ayrton Senna was the first retirement of the race. But look in the background as well. We see Michael Schumacher not only trying to overtake Ayrton Senna, but we see a lot of cars spinning from left to right and right to left. And there we come. Carl Wendlinger gets pushed out of the way by Stefano Modena, who's trying to avoid Bertrand Gachot. But remarkably, only Ayrton Senna retires, and Michael Schumacher has a lot of damage. The people behind them could all carry on, although Mauricio Gugelmin sustained enough damage to stop the race, and also Andrea Chiesa stopped out on the circuit, but that was a separate incident. And after one lap also, Bertrand Gachot was out of the race, so one lap gone, 4 men out. Riccardo Patrese was leading handsomely over Nigel Mansell, and the big question was, were there any team orders? Does Riccardo Patrese have to make way for Nigel Mansell and let him pass? It didn't look like it. Oh, Mansell getting all crossed up, because by this time also the rain was just about to start falling again. 8 laps into the race, and Gerhard Berger is the next retirement. The race is 8 laps old, and no McLaren Honda is in the race. Also out by that time was Gabriele Tarquini, who broke a throttle cable. Mika Häkkinen following Jean Alesi, and Häkkinen making very good use of that little bit of mayhem in the first corner, because he was running in 4th position. We had the 2 Williams, 5th position, the 2 Williams, then Martin Brundle, Jean Alesi and Mika Häkkinen. Johnny Herbert was following, but there was a gap between him and his teammate. This was the standings after 13 laps out of 72, we thought. Mika Häkkinen, who suddenly passed Jean Alesi in a very good move, when Alesi maybe tried a little bit too hard. But before the race got stopped because of the rain, Häkkinen was leading the Ferrari. Patrese was leading the race, however, and look at this. Nigel Mansell trying to go round the outside. Patrese braking very late. Nigel cutting across. He thinks he's gonna get let pass, but no way. Riccardo Patrese fights him all the way. So Nigel settles for a safe second for the moment. It's early days in this long race. Well, though we see Häkkinen, he's past Jean Alesi, and we can see the track getting wetter and wetter. But then there's a little Tyrrell in the way of Mika Häkkinen, and maybe inexperience and the fact that Olivier Grouillard didn't really get out of the way very quickly made sure that Jean Alesi could pass the Lotus again. Here we see Alesi getting more speed out of the slow corner, and on the run up to the chicane, the Ferrari is through. A very brave move by Jean Alesi. We see Gruyère blocking Häkkinen. And Ilesi making full use of it. Look at this. Nearly overshooting the corner, but he's got 4th place back. You can see the rain falling, and it's more and more. No one coming in for tire stops, and then during the 20th lap, they put the red flag out. The clerk of the course, Roland de Brunsrade, thinks it's too dangerous to keep going, and everybody has to stop, and we will restart, and the classification will be after 18 laps, and that will be the grid for the next race. So Riccardo Patrese has 0.9 of a second advantage over Nigel Mansell in 2nd place. The race will be stopped, and Gruyère nearly spins, and the 2 results will be put together, and you get one big result. And there we see the red flag, and everybody stops. And the man who might have the biggest problem because he's got to stop is Carl Wendlinger, because look at his car when he parks it. Johnny Morbidelli is the first one to park it. There we see Ferraris coming, and Michael Schumacher after 18 laps is in 20th place, and he's 1 lap down on the leader. And look on your right, you see the March losing all its water. I think it got hit during that little tussle coming into the Adelaide hairpin. Well, the whole race distance was going to be 69 laps now, so join us after the break for the remaining 51 laps of the French Grand Prix 1992 here on Eurosport. We're back in a sec. Riccardo Patrese on pole position for that second, well, 60%, 70% of the French Grand Prix. The race being run in 2 parts, and luckily we had our computers there, the Tag Heuer Olivetti timing system, because they would add it up together, and being there, looking on the computer, you would instantly know what was happening. Even if someone was in front on the road, he could still be behind, and the computer would say it all. After 18 laps, that was the standings, and the standings was going to be the grid. Riccardo Patrese and Nigel Mansell. And everybody could line up, but of course not everybody did line up. And Ukio Katayama had a problem getting away, trying to restart his engine. So we had to do it all over again. Ayrton Senna came on the grid, had a little chat with Michael Schumacher, saying, listen Michael, you don't do those sort of things on the very first lap of a Grand Prix. And even on the restart, the sun came out, and again, everybody was on slick tires. Well, the lights changed, and a very good, if not a bit optimistic start from Olivier Gruyère. And Johnny Herbert losing quite a lot of places, but again, it's Riccardo Patrese taking the lead of the French Grand Prix. Into the Adelaide hairpin for the very first time. And again, look at the back of your screen, because the first time Schumacher tried round the inside, now he's got to go round the outside, but he just gets cut off by Stefano Modena. And this time the car flies really high, a broken wishbone, and the end of Schumacher's race. After 18 laps, his race is run. Here we see it again in slow motion. He just gets a bit on the grass, the car gets sideways, hits Modena, the car flies up in the air, and that's the end of the German race. The German's race, and his second retirement of the year. So we've got Gesho out of the race, Chiesa, Gugelmin, Senna, Tarquini, Berger, and now the first retirement of that second race is Michael Schumacher. Riccardo Patrese let Nigel Mansell pass. Well, he sort of waved him by, but didn't want to say anything. He said a firm no comment whether there were any team orders, but we talked to Nigel Mansell later on in the program about that. And Aguri Suzuki, the 20th lap of the race, parks his footwork Mugen Honda. John Alesi is following the car in front. Sorry, that was Ivan Capelli following Gomez and Butson. Both Alesi's in the top 10, but after 25 laps, a very disappointing race again for the Cecil Jordan Yamaha team, their team owner Eddie Jordan. The race is run, they can prepare for Silverstone, which is their home Grand Prix. Nigel Mansell opening up a gap, and on the 20th lap he put in the fastest lap of the race very easily. Sorry, the 37th lap, 1:17.070, which was a second quicker than anybody else. Ivan Capelli, and there we see Jean Alesi. Sorry, we're riding with Jean Alesi behind Martin Brundle. Brundle, who knows he can't catch the Williams, and this is the end of Ivan Capelli. After 38 laps, the engine doesn't want to go any further, so Capelli's race is over. Also, Carl Wendlinger retires on the 33rd lap with a broken gearbox. And then the rain comes again. We thought we'd had it all, but the rain comes again, and Mika Häkkinen attacks Martin Brundle. Brundle has a little bit of a problem. The car cut out a couple of times, and Häkkinen is by in a flash. And could we see a Lotus on the rostrum? That would be a marvelous result for the Lotus team, especially for Mika Häkkinen, whose best result to date was a 5th place. And that was earlier this year last year in Imola, when he finished 5th with the Lotus 102, then with the Judd engine. But Mika spun, and Martin's pie in a flash again. Mika spun because the rain started to come down again, and this time the race wasn't going to be stopped, and also Thierry Boutsen spun his car. The fact of the matter was that Thierry was running without a clutch, and when the car stopped he couldn't get it back into gear, and that was the end of his race. Olivier Grouillard on the left and JJ Lehto on the right, now closest to the camera. Did they touch? They did. Grouillard spins and JJ continues. Jean Alesi getting very close to Riccardo Patrese, and remarkably, Alesi was putting in very, very fast times. Nigel Mansell was the first to stop for wet weather tires. He said afterwards he timed it to perfection. On come the wets, off goes the slicks. And even after the wets were on, Jean Alesi in the wet was lapping just as fast on slicks as Mansell was on wet weather tires. Mansell not losing the lead over teammate Riccardo Patrese, who turns onto the main straight when Mansell gets out of the pits. But of course Patrese's got to get in the pits for wets. Martin Brundle coming in. A slick pit stop by the Benetton team. Faster than the Williams, but Martin needed a bit more than that to win this Grand Prix. Riccardo Patrese coming into the pits, and his pit stop did take a little longer than Mansell's pit stop, but only half a second. Next retirement we just saw on the right was Ukio Katayama. On the 49th lap, his race is run. And now we see Alesi. Remember, he's still on slicks. on slicks, and on the grass you haven't got any grip at all. Luckily, he escaped with nothing more than maybe a bit of a whirl in his head, and the lazy carried on. But surely now he would come into the pits and change to wets. André de Cesaris parked his car on the 51st lap. But Jean the Lazy did not want to know about surrendering to the rain and still didn't come in. But when the weather was this bad, he had to come into the pits. Well, he didn't. Well, Gianni Morbidelli's got problem keeping his car on the road when it's on wets. A Lazy goes as fast as this man when his car's still on slicks. And this man is, of course, Nigel Mansell. A Lazy finally coming in, nearly losing it because there's so much water on the pit entry. A Lazy with his pit stop to wets, a bit late I must say, but then again he was very spectacular indeed. Well, you should not really try to get away that quick, Jean. A Lazy stole it, costing him valuable seconds, and he lost 4th place in the process. But a couple of laps later, the Ferrari engine cried enough, lost all its oil somewhere on the circuit, and a Lazy had to retire for the 4th time this season. Martin Brundle trying to overtake Pierluigi Martini and Gianni Morbidelli, who are engaged in their own battle, and well, maybe they couldn't see the blue flags because of the rain. Who knows? Whatever happens, Martin took about a couple of laps to get past these two. Finally, it was very easy for Nigel Mansell to drive to the finish from here. He had to keep concentrating, of course, because in these conditions you can't allow yourself to slip up 1 millisecond. And Martin Brundle on his way to his officially best Grand Prix result. Jean the Lazy retired on the 61st lap out of 69. 8 laps to go, and that's the end of the Ferrari engine, who dropped his oil here where Martin Brundle spins his car. But not to worry, 3rd place would be safe. Martin, who finished 2nd once in Detroit with the Tyrrell, but he didn't get any points for that. And this 3rd place, his very first official Formula 1 podium. Nigel Mansell wins Grand Prix number 27 out of his Grand Prix career. Riccardo Patrese finishes 2nd. Martin Brundle 3rd. Mika Häkkinen, his best result ever, in 4th place. Eric Gomez, his best result since Montreal, which is his best result ever as well, in 5th. And Johnny Herbert finishes 6th. 7th, Michele Alboreto. 8th, Gianni Morbidelli. 9th, JJ Leto. And 10th, Pierluigi Martini. How is it to win here in France with the Renault engine?
Oh, it's fantastic. I'm very proud for Renault. They've worked very hard, and to win with their engine and in their own country, and with the various presidents that are here, I mean, it's marvellous, and it's I'm very proud to have done it for them.
Yeah, but Nigel Mansell winning the Grand Prix, another 10 points at his tally. But Martin Brundle on the right in the yellow on the podium. A happy man indeed. A very relieved Martin Brundle with 3rd place.
No, I don't think relieved's quite the right word. I mean, we've been racing so well all year. The first 4 races, as you know, were a disaster for one reason or another, either mechanical or I threw it off the road. But, you know, I've been racing very strongly. Monte Carlo, Imola, Canada we should have won if we didn't have the breakdown. The car ran really well here, one little electrical problem, and we got the result we deserved.
Now, after the race was stopped, I saw one of the Goodyear technicians measuring your tyres. You said yesterday you were going to look after them. Were you happy with them at that stage of the race?
Yeah, it was really easy, especially after Gerhard stopped. I was, you know, just pacing myself with a Lacey, and I couldn't catch the two Williams, so there was no point in trying. I was just keeping my tyres and driving really for third place and hoping they would run into each other, which I thought they were going to at the start of.
Mika, your best result in Formula